Greetings. I am King Nebuchadnezzar, the destroyer of nations. And I've ruled this great Babylon for over 40 years. And I am the most powerful and longest reigning king of the Babylonian Empire. You may know this already, but let me refresh your memory. I am the greatest ruler of the Babylonian Empire in the 7th century, to be specific. I'm a renowned builder. I built this great Babylon that you see before you. I brought Babylon to its power and prosperity. I expanded the empire and rebuilt the city. I built the Ishtar Gate and restored the temple of Marduk. I constructed the hanging gardens of Babylon for my wife, Amidus, which is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. I am a conqueror. I and my kingdom are the most feared among nations. I defeated the Egyptians at the Battle of Carchemish. I've conquered the kingdom of Judah, not once, but twice for defying me. I destroyed Jerusalem and its temple and carried the Jews into exile. And that began the 70 years of their exile. When I became king of Babylon, Jehoiakim was the king of Judah at the time. He did submit to me, but 3 years later, he rebelled against me, so I besieged Jerusalem. And I brought back certain of the children of Israel to Babylon, the smartest and the brightest, so that I could train them in the ways and wisdom of Babylon. Now, among the men that I brought back to Babylon, there were 4 that stood out: Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You may know them as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But I will tell you about them a little later on. When King Jehoiakim died, his son, Jehoiachin, became king of Judah. After 3 months, he surrendered to me, and I took everything from Jerusalem. All the treasures of the house of their God, all the treasures of the king's house, and I cut all pieces and all the vessels of gold. I carried away all Jerusalem, all the princes, all the mighty men, and even 10,000 captives, even craftsmen and the blacksmiths. Only the poorest remained in Jerusalem. Then I set up Zedekiah, Jehoiachin's uncle, as king. And eventually Zedekiah rebelled against me. So for a second time, I and my whole army went up against Jerusalem. But it was much worse this time. When the famine was sore in Jerusalem, we breached the city and captured the Israelites. Zedekiah tried to run away, but we captured him and took him to Riblah. I killed Zedekiah's sons in front of him, and then I blinded him, bound him in fetters, and took him back to Babylon. The captain of the guard, my servant, Nebuzaradan, went into Jerusalem and destroyed their God's temple, and burnt the king's house and all the houses of Jerusalem. We broke their walls and carried the Israelites away captive. Now, back to these 4 young Jews. They were princes of the royal house of Judah. When Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came to me after 3 years of being in Babylon already, they stood out of the crowd. I've questioned them of all manners of wisdom and understanding, and they were 10 times wiser than any of my magicians and astrologers in the land of Babylon. Now, one night, I had a very troubling dream, and I had to find out the meaning of this dream. I called for all of my magicians and astrologers, and the wise men and asked them to tell me what my dream meant. It distressed me so much. But here's the thing. I know that they could lie and make up some false interpretation. So I demanded that they tell me what the dream was first. I would say that was a very smart thing that I did. Needless to say, they could not tell me what my dream was, so I commanded for them to be killed. Then Belteshazzar, or Daniel as you may know him, came to me and asked me to give him some time, and he would tell me what my dream was and the interpretation thereof. So I allowed him to do such a thing. The next day, Belteshazzar stood before me, and I asked him, "Are you able to tell me what I dreamt and the meaning thereof?" He answered me and said, "Let God reveal the secrets." And to my surprise, this man began to tell me my dream. I was amazed. He told me about the great statue, and it was made of gold and silver, brass, iron, clay, and of a stone that smote the statue and ground it to powder. How that same stone grew into a mountain that filled the earth. But that's not all. After he told me what my dream was, he began to tell me what it meant. I fell on my face and worshipped Belteshazzar. His God was the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and the revealer of secrets. And because of this, I made him a great man in Babylon. I made him ruler over all the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were set over the affairs of Babylon and the province, but Belteshazzar sat in my gate. Now, I wanted the glory of my kingdom to last forever. So I built a huge golden image on the plain of Dura where all could see it. It was the most magnificent thing to look upon, a symbol of the might of Babylon. I had a celebration to honor the image and invited all the governors and the officers of the provinces, and I commanded them that everyone fall down and worship the image whenever they heard the music. And whoever disobeyed my command would be thrown into the fiery furnace that same hour. When the music began, everyone bowed. But some of the Chaldeans came to me and told me of 3 Jews that did not bow down to the image as I had decreed. These men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I was furious. These same men that I had set over the affairs of the provinces of Babylon, they did not worship my gods and my image that I had set up. I gave Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego a second chance, and I warned them that they would be cast into the fiery furnace. I mean, how could their God deliver them from my hands? But their answer, "Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace." They told me that they would not serve the gods or worship the golden image. I was enraged. I commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than normal. My most mighty men tied up those traitors and cast them into the fiery furnace. The heat of the fire was so intense that those who cast them in were burned to the death. I thought that was the end of those 3 men. But when I looked into the furnace, I noticed There were 3 men that I thrown into the furnace, was it not? But when I looked, there was 4 walking unharmed by the fire. And the 4th was like the Son of God. Then I said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. The 3 Jews simply stepped out of the furnace. The fire had no power on them. Their hair was not singed. Their coats were not burnt. They did not even smell of fire. It was a miracle. I had to praise their God. This was when I realized that I had to make a new law, that no man, no one should speak against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if they did, they would be put to death, and their houses would be ruined. Then I promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to a place of greater honor in my kingdom. I began to realize that there was no other God that could deliver in this sort. But the Most High God still had plans for me. I had a dream that made me very afraid, and these visions, they troubled me. So I called all the wise men of Babylon to make known unto me the interpretation of my dream, but they could not. At last, Daniel came in before me and I told him of my dream. There was a tree, tall and strong, reaching to the heavens, and it was beautiful. The leaves were fair, and it bore much fruit. The beasts of the field had shade under it, and the birds dwelt in the boughs. Then a watcher, and then Holy One, came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said, "Cut down the tree, and cut off the branches, shake off his leaves, and scatter his fruit. Chase the animals away from it. Leave the stump of this tree, of his roots in the earth, even the bands of iron and brass. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him. And let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by decree of the watchers, and the demand of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. I implored Belteshazzar to tell me the interpretation of the dream. He himself was astonished and troubled by the dream. And he said that I was the tree, great and powerful, but I would go insane for 7 years, live in the fields like an animal, with the long hair and fingernails, and eat grass. A year later, while I was walking in my palace, I said, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom, by the might of my power, and for the honor of my majesty?" And while the words were still in my mouth, I heard a voice from heaven saying, and I still remember it to this day, "O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee." That same hour, I was driven from men. I ate the grass as oxen. My body was wet with dew of heaven. My hair grew like eagle's feathers, and my nails like a bird's claws. For months, I was a madman. I became like an animal, a beast of the field. Until, at the end of days, I lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. I blessed the Most High God. I praised and honored him that liveth forever. I realized that he will do according to his will. And my reason, honor, and brightness returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom once again. An excellent majesty was added unto me. God humbled me, an arrogant ruler. I was his instrument to do his will. Now, I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he will abase. I am King Nebuchadnezzar. Thank you for listening to my story.